Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. As-salatu was-salam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. On to the business at hand. This is Islam Works. And, you know, last session we were talking about, I began by telling you about the misconceptions that people have spread, some intentionally, some out of ignorance, meaning unintentionally, about Islam. Some of the things that were said about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that he was a person who was having, well, I guess you call it the equivalent to seizures. And he was saying things that, you know, only crazy people would say. And that he was doing things that only crazy people would do, and only the poor people followed him. And there are many things like this that have followed throughout the history of Islam. Now people are trying to project Islam as a violent way of life. Oh, the Muslims are violent. They're always saying how they should kill this one and kill that one. And that's not what we do. We're no different than anybody else, and is that if people come at us in a way that's unnecessarily hostile, we have a right to defend ourselves. You know, that's the only thing I can tell you. You know, an ant has pincers, a bee has a stinger. These are creatures that will ignore us, going about their business. Okay? But if you stick your hand down into an ant's colony, all right, the ants are going to say, hey, this is a foreign body in here. They're trying to disrupt, you know, our lifestyle. If you stick your hand into a beehive, same thing. Okay? I hope you get the analogy. I'm not saying that Muslims are like bees or ants. No, we're human beings. And we have an idea about morality that means that we have to protect our women. We have to protect our children from the harm of drugs, from the harm of premarital sex, or from the harm that comes from bad ideas about how to make a living, go out and steal your money, or these types of things. These are things that we believe are wrong because they're told that they're wrong by God in our book, the Holy Quran, but also in the Bible and the Torah. Same thing. The laws of Prophet Musa, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or alayhi salatu wassalam, what we commonly refer to as the Ten Commandments, and many, many other books, all say that human beings, when we pass away from here, will be rewarded or punished based on what we've done in this life. And these books, and the Quran being the seal of these books, tell us that the best way to make sure that we're rewarded in the permanent life to come is by doing good, not by doing good, not by doing evil, not by extortion, not by lying, not by fornicating, not by harming our bodies through taking harmful substances in, and so forth and so on. So our brother Abdullah Baron from Los Angeles, California, who is a nutritionist, he also has a good understanding, a good foundation in history, is a brother who accepted Islam at a certain part of his life, in early adulthood, and Allah blessed him to be able to meld, to bring the two aspects, the two interests that he had together in such a way as to, at the same time, fulfill his heart's desire to know about his people's plight, but at the same time to help not just his people, because he understands public health, all right? So that's anyone from whether it's the Eurocentric people or the Asia-centric, our brothers from India and Malaysia and China and other places, or Afrocentric communities will come to him, all right? Public health is just that, especially in America, because America is a country that has people from every country on earth in its citizenry. So, Brother Abdullah, last week we were speaking about the way that you had gotten into public health. So would you want to take up the narrative from there, and please, and tell us exactly how it is that you began to bring the third element together, and I'd even say the binding element, with being Islam, to show you how to use the things that you learned in college.
Okay. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, most merciful. Wassalatu wassalamu ala khayri anbiya wa mursaleen Muhammad. And may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon the best of his prophets and messengers, Muhammad, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in, and upon his family and all of his companions. In your introduction, you brought up so many dense things that each could pull off, and I guess anybody's story could build on. The first thing I recall you mentioning was about the contortion of the picture of Islam that's being done. And I remember when I was I wasn't Muslim. I was looking into Islam, and we're raised on cartoons. Yosemite Sam, when he was the picture of the Arab, and he has a huge sword.
But it seems like we all got the same thing.
The same upper, yes. And so he has movies too? Yes, and so he has this big sword, and in my mind, and then you see the Indiana Jones and all these things happening in Egypt. And when there's the two Somali brothers who had invited me to the masjid during Ramadan, Mustafa and Abdi, they were engineering students. And I remember the first day I came, because I wanted to find the truth. But at the same time, I was a little scared, because when I came into the masjid in Davis, I was thinking, oh no, they're going to know I'm not a Muslim. And then there was going to be somebody who's going to come back with a big saber and cut me. And this is the thing that was going on in my head. And I shared with one of the other staff.
So you had the idea that Islam was violent also.
Oh, for sure. And even the hijackings during the 70s and 80s, when I went to meet one of the brothers who was giving me dawah, inviting me to Islam, and he wasn't there, but there was a car of some Muslims with beards and stuff like that, and they were looking for one of the administrative buildings at the university. And I tried to give them directions, go this way and this way. And they said, no, just come in the car. And I didn't think about it at first. I mean, these are three men, they didn't seem harmful. I got in the car, once that door closed, my brain changed. I said, oh my goodness, the line is going to be dead black students, and such forth. It didn't happen like that. It was a wonderful experience, but these things are in the background. But when you mentioned about the whole public health and the whole history, one of the, not complicated, but simple things is, say for genetics, you mentioned about how America is very diverse. Public health is very diverse. I took the opportunity to take 3 different genetic tests when I was in America, and the cost range was quite wide. When it uncovers the results, and I kind of knew what the results might be, but you invite yourself to make a story about what happened.
Now, when you say genetic test, you're talking about when they check your DNA to find out about your ancestry.
Yes, 23andMe, Ancestry DNA, and Family Tree DNA, all 3 of those companies, because I wanted to triangulate them to see, is this one going to give me one version, and this one going to give me another version, and 3 different versions. And what you find is, what I kind of expected. I expected to find some European in my blood, and African, and maybe some little Native American, maybe a drop. But it was, when you look at it, what you say is very real, is that we all belong to each other. We have the same mother and father, Adam, and from Adam was made Eve. And the genetic tests say 30% West African. But then you combine, let's say, Spain, and you combine Libya and Iberia and Central Europe, and it ended up being like 63%. And this is just from my father's side. So how do you balance that? And most of us as African Americans have some amount of European in this. So as a goal to...
Those of us who have ancestors that were part of
the slave trade,
right.
The Atlantic trade, slave trade. So you have to, that invites you to ask, how do you bring about effective change? And then the aspect of what Islam tells you means you can't go too far on the African thing A person couldn't go too far the European thing or the Arab thing. You have to have a balance because there's a belonging. So Islam prescribes that kind of balance. It gives a criteria. You mentioned about in the Bible, there's the 10 Commandments, for example. When you talking with the Christians, say, well, let's talk about them. There's 10 of them. The first one, it says that thou shalt not make no God before me. It's the Tawheed, the oneness of God. I say, well, because if you can get that one right, all the others we can have a conversation about. And it's the first thing that in Islam we have for the two testimonies of faith. Okay. There's no God worthy of worship except for Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. Then we build upon that, the prayers, the fasting, and the Hajj. And
okay. So, but how has all this affected you as an adult after you entered adulthood, when you got married? Yes. These different things. What's the transition, the bridge? How did you start to use Islam as you developed and grew?
I use it as a transition to achieve the things that everybody wants, but in a way that Allah would be pleased with. So when I became Muslim, before Islam.
When you say what everybody wants.
For example, companionship. Let's talk about companionship, female companionship. Most people have an inkling towards find some type of companionship with the opposite sex. It doesn't change once you become Muslim, but the way you achieve it is going to be different. Okay. And so you reprioritize your schedule and the things you want to achieve based upon that parameter you have to operate. Okay. So when I became Muslim, one of the things that was high on my priority was to find a compatible mate. Okay. And I made different choices.
So you got married after you became a Muslim?
After I became Muslim. Yes, definitely. 2 years after becoming Muslim. Okay. And so Islam gave the scaffolding. Public health was a way of translating. It gave me a framework to translate it into a language that people might use now. Or that was what I was aspiring to learn, how to translate the scaffolding of that Islam gives, and not just the scaffolding, but the meat.
Now, when you say the scaffolding, you mean the support?
I mean the support, the limits, the range of operation that you are allotted in terms of, let's say, this, like food, as an example. What's the range of food that you can operate in to nourish your body? Companionship. Okay. What should you be looking as a criteria for good companionship, male or female? So
so you use all of this as a foundation for your early life,
as a new Muslim,
you're entering into the society as a responsible adult.
As a responsible, yes, and to bring about more healing than you do harm. Because that's the goal. You want to maximize benefit, minimize casualties. You're looking for benefit, but without doubt, there's going to be some type of casualty or some type of loss. Okay. And preparing mentally for how you manage that and navigate. Through life, Islam gives that perspective, and particularly mentally, because when I was in graduate school, it was a big transition. So there was a lot of, you struggle mentally, so much as physically. And so the nourishment it gives you is a base to delve into, to dip into, to kind of wash away those things that are worrying you, to kind of clear and put in perspective things that most people worry about: money, maybe food, security, good companionship. And so it gives you a criteria to what should I be looking for? What's enough? What's too much? Is there any exceptions? Okay. So and that gels very well with public health and trying to find a cohesive action that makes people who are very vulnerable have some safety.
Okay, now, as an American,
yes,
okay, and a Muslim in America, in the time that you accepted Islam, I remember what it was like in the 70s personally. Well, no, not in the 70s. It would be in the 80s for you.
For me, it was the 80s, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
70s and 80s, yeah.
Because, see, when I accepted Islam in New York, there wasn't a single halal restaurant that I was aware of in New York. So we had to go and eat at the kosher places, the kosher restaurants. Yeah. Okay? And in doing so, this placed us in a position wherein, well, the way that I came, I didn't even know there was such a, I knew halal and I knew haram, but I didn't associate it with where I ate. if you understand what I'm
Yes.
saying. I didn't know that Muslim food, actually had more range than Jewish food did. Okay.
Yes.
And as Allah says in the Quran, these restrictions are what they put on themselves.
Yes.
Okay. And so at any rate, in doing that and living like that, I found that, and see, another thing with me was I got married before I became a Muslim. But alhamdulillah, I was fortunate enough to marry a good lady, all right, who, when I became a Muslim, she became a Muslim.
Yeah.
Okay. And, we were able to grow into, to support one another in that, in our ignorance.
Yes.
And at the same time to help one another to understand, what, she would get from the perspective of being a woman in the Muslim community once we entered into Islam, okay? And what I understand as far as my role as a man, okay? And, these things helped us as far as raising our children is concerned. Right. Now, your life was a little bit different.
Yeah.
In fact, it was a lot different.
Yeah.
Because you became a Muslim, and I'm assuming that your wife was Muslim when you married her.
Yes.
Okay. So you both had a foundation in Islam, okay, when you came together. All right. So now, as you're pursuing this and you're working with non-Muslim people in the society, okay, how did you find your being a Muslim, all right, affected your relationship with your non-Muslim co-workers and your non-Muslim students, your fellow students?
Or family.
Okay.
I mean, as a new Muslim, it's challenging because when you accept Islam, you're looking for a solution, something to heal the hurts you have, to provide answers. So you open the book, you open up the Quran, you read it, you open up the books of the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad, Bukhari and Muslim.
And you find the answer there.
You find the answer, and when you read it, you want to apply it. You want to see it happen. And so, and not having the understanding about there's certain things that they're in the book, but you have to, there's a setting that you can do it in. You have to be certain settings that exist for you to be able to do this. You don't just jump out, you read it, and automatically do it. No. So you don't understand that.
Okay.
So it was difficult.
Okay.
It was difficult at work.
Your family made it difficult, or you didn't want to offend them?
No, I had no problem. I didn't have a problem. I wasn't trying to offend them. But
Okay.
for example, if you went to the club before and drank alcohol before, you say, now I don't do that.
What about the pork experience?
Oh, that was a big, yes, that was, that's an ongoing thing. You say,
no
I would go,
pork.
yes, you
talking
go
about
shopping.
no pork, boy. You was raised up eating
Yes, we
pork.
were raised on this, or even going shopping. Go shopping with my mother. I can't stop her to buy what she buys. But when we get to the house, I'm gonna carry in all the groceries except for the pork and alcohol. I said, you bought it. I love you, and I have an obligation, but I'm not touching it. I'm not going to aid you in participation. So that made some static. That particular thing.
Now, do you find that, okay, I'm assuming that before you became a Muslim, you drank alcohol?
Occasionally.
Occasionally.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah,
Okay.
occasionally, because I had an early experience where I developed an aversion to it.
Oh, okay. Because see me, I was a binge drinker.
Yeah.
Not an alcoholic, but I would go to house parties and I would drink the alcohol.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, in doing that, okay, how do you find your decision-making processes after you stop drinking alcohol?
Oh,
And even in the changing of your diet. Now, you're a person who was
Yeah.
trained in nutrition.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, and so you understand the pork, the pig, the swine, okay, and you understand that this animal, I don't care how clean its environment is, it's a dirty animal. It doesn't sweat, okay. It's one of the first things they take you off of if you have high blood pressure. Okay, the doctor says stop eating it, and these types of things. So and you're interacting with people. All right, once you pulled away from it, what type of subtle changes did you see in your overall health and your overall decision-making processes?
Before I even studied nutrition, I was more restricted. Once I started studying nutrition, I was more flexible. I didn't put the same type of restrictions because I had a little bit more knowledge about how much of something was going to be good or bad.
So now you're
This is before I was
you're
Muslim.
not looking at it as pork, you're looking at it as protein.
Well, I didn't care for it. Yes, as protein, but also the source, the quality.
Okay.
And the only other thing was it changed. The more I understood, the more flexibility I found I had, but you had to understand where the limits were.
You know, Brother Abdullah, your narrative, your stories, the information, it's so full, okay, that we can't cover it in our 20-minute time segment, okay? And I'm going to have to ask you to come back at another time so we can do parts 3
Inshallah.
or maybe a part 4, okay? And, you know, and you can impart more information, and inshallah, we can help our viewers out there to understand how Islam works.